So I think it's very important for our listeners to understand that we are meeting them where they're at as a first step. We bridge down to meet them where they're at and we move them up. We don't stay there. And even with the use of the verbal intermediary, when it's, do you want red or blue? No answer, red or blue, tell Rebecca. That's a really easy way to use an intermediary and facilitate it. But there's many times we have to tweak the intermediary and increase the distance and play a game that way, or the older individual needs to fist length, half an arm, full arm. We set up these charts. So I'm only saying this because I want our listeners to understand it's not as simple as just a choice question. It's not as simple as just a visual. It's how do we put it together for that particular individual, meeting them where they're at for their whys, but also for their stages of social communication. Also, when you said, which I really liked about, in the moment, I'm picturing a small group, we're big with progress doesn't occur in a group, so it's away from the group. And how do we do it? Through small groups, through buddies, blah, 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 blah. And so we know that. So I'm picturing a small group where the teacher's asking a question, what their favorite season is, because it's ending winter, coming into spring. Hey, what's your favorite season? Focusing on other kids first is a way to prepare subtly, because the child has a chance to think about their answer instead of them being the first one in line to answer. So that gives them a chance. The teacher knowing that that child will do best with write it down. So the teacher may, again, say, hey guys, why don't you write down your favorite season, everyone? And then that gives that child the opportunity to read their favorite season. So we integrate these strategies, these interventions specific to these kids that would help them without bringing a lot of attention to it. Mm-hmm. And by focusing on another child first, focusing on a sibling first to give your order, I give my order first, dad gives his order second, it gives that child a chance to advocate when they're ready, but also know that sometimes they get a little nervous. Some kids will jump right in eventually. Mm-hmm. I'll have my chicken Caesar. And that's great. But if they don't, it's okay. We want to involve everyone in the process, not just isolate that child out. Mm-hmm. So we talked about visuals. The more, seeing it minimizes the need to think and process, lowers their cognitive load. It's right there. It's repetitive, the same things over and over. And the reason we talk about choices, and we're not doing choices for long, if anything, we pull them away sooner. We go to more direct questions and eventually open-ended questions. In fact, we often say choices with visuals, direct questions with visuals, pull away the choices, just say direct questions with visuals, maybe open-ended with visuals, maybe eventually open-ended thought-provoking questions. So we will, kind of move along that continuum based on that child's setting, who they're with, and their readiness. And so I think it's important for our listeners to understand that choices is a really easy thing with the right answer second. Yeah. So Dr. Jenna, give us some examples of ways that you use choices with your clients in session.
Yeah. Well, I think going back to even the example that I just gave with the polls, many times, even though they see the visual of what's your favorite season, and then there's all these different options, I still many times will give a choice. So let's say I say to a child, okay, we're going to go over what's your favorite season. I want you to write down your favorite. So let's say they write it down and I see that they wrote down winter, right? Or they circled winter. I might say to them at first, like you're saying, I might test it out a little and I might say, what's your favorite season? And if I wait a few seconds, I might then look at them and I say, is your favorite season fall or winter? Right? And just having the subtlety of having that last answer being the right answer, it's the last thing they heard. So they're more likely to just kind of repeat exactly what you said. So it helps them with their processing. So that's an example of how we do that. Or many times I actually might start to use choices as a starting point for initiation. So when we think about the social communication bridge, and I know we started talking about it a little bit today, there's two components of the bridge, right? There's kind of a back and forth of communication. So there's a responding piece and an initiating piece. And what's interesting is most of the time, kids and teens and young adults and adults, individuals have a harder time with initiating than they do with responding. So choices is actually a really great way to start the initiation process. So if let's say we're going back to the what's your favorite season, I might say, all right, and I'm going to now have you ask me a question, okay? I'm going to write down some questions here. All right. Do you want to ask me what's your favorite sport, or what's your favorite season? So again, so we want the visual. So I might have a child, I might pause and say, I want you to circle which one you want to ask me, right? And maybe they circle season. And then I might re-ask them and I might say, what do you want to ask me? Do you want to ask me my favorite sport or season? And they repeat season. Or again, depending on where they are in the bridge, right? We want to respect that. So that's another way to start that process, because many times families will say, all right, my child is responding when needed. Obviously it's maybe more shorter responses and I want them to expand a little bit, but it's really the initiation part. They're not comfortable initiating. So choices is a great way to start that process, because again, the more open-ended and the more expansion, especially for kids who have underlying speech and language challenges, we have found that most of our kids have expressive language when it comes to the speech and language. So expressing themselves with a longer sentence could be harder. So the choices also just help by being very simple and being direct.
No, really, really great points. And I want to ask our listeners a question. If your child is verbally responsive, one of the number one questions we get is, how do I get him to be initiative? And I'll say, and I say this all the time at Communicamp, I'll say, what do you think the chances are if your child is verbally responsive? And you know the answer to this, that's why you're smiling. What are the chances that if your child is verbally responsive, that they will become verbally initiative very quickly, almost like within a minute? And they'll look at me and go, but he's not initiative. I go, but he's responsive. And they're like, yeah, he responds, but he doesn't initiate. I go, okay, I can guarantee you 100%. This isn't like a magic trick. Feeling I'm creating a magic trick, that he will become verbally initiative within 3 seconds. And they're like, that's not true. There's no way you can do that. And I'll say, okay, well, he reads, he writes, and he verbally responds. So going back to what's your favorite season, it could be anything. It could be like, when's your birthday, or what's your favorite sport, or where are you going for spring break? I mean, it doesn't matter. One of the common questions, it's any question. I'm just going back to what's your favorite season. And I say to that individual, let's write this down. I'm going to write this down. You write it down. What is your favorite season? And they write down, what is your favorite season? And I say, okay, great. Now, why don't you just read that to me? And they go, what is your favorite season? Boom, verbally initiative. So that script approach for a verbally responsive individual to write and read is a very powerful strategy that teachers can use in class. Parents can use for interview questions for aunts and uncles. They can use during board games where they write out their question and they read it. Yes, it's not spontaneous, ready to go conversation yet, but it's a step in the process. And what I want our listeners to understand, you don't go from 0 to 100 with one snap of a finger to be the most confident, comfortable, connected, verbally responsive, initiative, elaborative individual by offering them prizes and rewards. For most or not, individuals that struggle with social communication and selective mutism, it's the many steps in between that lead them to a more confident social communication opportunity and encounter. And so these different exercises, these different strategies, setting up the world for the child, the games, the goals, the creating the rewards, whatever it may be, is a step in the process to becoming a confident social verbal communicator. It's not just do it, not just go up to the store clerk and ask a question. In fact, so many of the clients, the patients we see at our center who have been in past treatments that didn't make progress, the pressure was so great to verbalize when they weren't there yet. And I need to preface, they weren't there yet. So it's respecting them where they're at, meeting them where they're at, respecting their stages, understanding their whys and how they play into that individual's presentation. And then training the parents, training the teachers, and getting that child actively involved. I call it acknowledgement and assessment. There are many we see that aren't there yet. They're not acknowledging it. They're not able to assess their feelings 0 to 5, 0 to 3. That's a part of the treatment to gain the sense of control and to build the long-standing coping skills. Mm-hmm. And so it's very, very important that all of this works together. It's not just one piece. It's all of it working together like a fine oiled machine.